You tell me when to start.
You're on.
I'm on? Okay. My father owned a store at 228 North Massachusetts Avenue, a tiny little delicatessen. It was a family store. And my parents worked so hard in the store that they had very little time for their children. And living in Atlantic City, we just used to put our bathing suits on. The first thing in the morning, we lived in bathing suits all day. Well, one day, in the neighborhood, around the corner, there was a firehouse next to a canal. An old canal with old rotted boats, half afloat. And we were into everything. My parents used to say, go play. Well, one night, it was getting dark, and we weren't home. And the firemen were our customers, and they used to pay, every time they got paid at the end of the month, they used to pay us, and they had charge accounts. Well, Joe and I, not Charlie wasn't here yet, Joe and I went down to the firehouse, and we got in one of these half-submerged boats. And we had some tin cans, and we were bailing out, and we got the boat so light that it started to drift. And it started to drift out toward the ocean. And here it was getting dark, and I said to Joe, I think we're in trouble. And we didn't have any paddles, we were using our hands. We were just crazy. So my parents started to panic, and they called the Coast Guard. They thought maybe we went to the beach, and they had no track of where we were. One of the firemen came in to buy food, and they said, have you seen, and everybody knew us, had you seen Joe and Nat? Oh yeah, they were out in a boat in the canal. Oh my God. Everybody rushed out there, and we were helpless in this boat. And they put a little motor skiff out there, and they brought us in. And my father, when we got home, my father said, take your pants down. And he got the broom. It's a true story. And my ass was red for about 2 days. He paddled the hell out of us. He said, you know, your mother and I almost died worrying about you kids. You know, we're trying to run a business and make a living for you so that you could have a better life. He said, and what you did was very inconsiderate. And you know something? We were so scared that we felt that we deserved to paddle. We said, go ahead, beat the hell out of us, because we were glad to be home. That's how scared we were. That's the fire story. Then there's a story about Charlie. When Charlie was born, naturally there's a 10-year separation in age. And they used to say, take Charlie and go. Go. Let's take him on the boardwalk. You know, just get out of our way because we're trying to run the store. And I have to get back to the store. My dad had 3 bins of coffee. He had the $1 a pound, 50 cents a pound, 25 cents a pound. And the women used to come in, and I remember this story vividly, and they say, your $1 coffee is the best that we've ever had. It's so much better than the 25-cent, and it all came out of the same bag. He had a grinder to grind the coffee. But anyway, we used to take Charlie up on the boardwalk, just to kill time. We didn't know what to do. So Joe would stand at the bottom of the ramp, and I'd say, now be careful, I'm going to push it. And little Charlie was in this carriage, and he was just an infant. And I used to, you're not familiar with Atlantic City. Atlantic City, to get up on the boardwalk, you had to walk up a steep ramp. And it must have been about 40 feet long, maybe 35, 40 feet long. So if you push something at the top, with gravity, it's going to go down. So I used to say, okay, now here he comes. And I would push the carriage, and that carriage would start rolling down, and little Charlie was in there holding on for dear life. And he couldn't do anything because we were so big, and we were supposed to be doing what was right. But it wasn't wrong. And I'm surprised. I knew why he grew up and he was nervous. He was a nervous child. What else can I tell you? We just had a lot of fun. We did a lot of crazy things. I did a lot of crazy things in my lifetime.
Tell us one of the craziest.
On the farm, on trick or treat, we used to, a bunch of boys in the neighborhood in Newfield, New Jersey. We had cows. We'd take a basket and put some cow plop in, cover it with newspaper, put it on the guy's porch, set the paper on fire and ring the bell. And he'd come out and stamp the fire out, and he's knee-deep in cow manure. We did that on, and then we had Italian neighbors, La Chapa, across the street from our farm. and they were wonderful people. They taught us how to farm, and they went with us to buy the first horse, and we bought a horse that was a cavalry horse, and he was young and spirited, and every 4 days he would run away, and we had 30 acres, and 15 acres was woods. So we had to go looking for him, and the Choppies always helped us in our farming career. So every time they had a party, my parents were working so hard on that farm, just so many hours a day, cleaning the eggs and when they keep taking care of the chickens, that Joe and I were always invited to the social affairs across the street, to the Italian parties, and they make the most wonderful veal parmesan and their spaghetti sauce. So they used to invite Joe and I. And one party, I'll never forget, there was a guy who thought he could sing opera at this party. They're all Italians, and we were the only 2 young kids there. And he had his mouth open so wide, and I'm so ashamed of this. I took a small apple as his mouth was open, and I put it right, this is a true story, and I put it in his mouth, and everybody roared, and I was so ashamed, and I apologized to him, and I said, "You're really a good singer," I said, "and I'm awful sorry, but I was so tempted to get a laugh, so I said, I put that apple in your mouth," and he said, "I'll forgive you."
And you haven't changed. Still not getting a laugh.
I couldn't sing worth a damn. Because I had a wonderful voice in those days, and you remember I used.
Yeah, you made a record.
I did make a record, and I used to sing "Ailey, Ailey" that everybody that was Jewish would cry. I used to, and now
Wasn't your
they tell
maiden
me,
name
where's the
Janet
doctor?
Pierce?
Oh, doctor, the latest talk on I've been taking Fosamax for 10 years, and now the latest report says that people that have been on Fosamax are showing disturbances in their esophagus, and I can't sing anymore, and I'm blaming it on the esophagus.
Maybe that's why I can't sing. I take
I think maybe my problems with the Fosamax. I think maybe my problems with the Fosamax, that my doctors have been calling it reflux. So I don't know. I don't have any pain or anything, but after a while, I voice. And when we have a sing-along, I sound like a frog. I can't help it all. So what else can I tell you?
You have any other stories?
Tell the story of, what were the people across the street from you in the shack?
Speak a little
What
louder.
were the black folks in the shack across the
That's a
street?
sad story.
Oh, the Hyatts.
The Hyatts. Tell
Yeah,
the story.
George Hyatt.
Tell the story of the Hyatts.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you a story of Joe Hyatt.
It's a very
And
interesting story.
the paper in the Vineland was the Vineland Times Journal at the time. It's another different name now. And we were very close to the colored family across the street. They didn't have running water. They had a pump in the backyard and a pump in the house. And they had an outhouse. They lived directly across the street from our farm. And we got very friendly. And lots of times, when we need heavy manual labor and if somebody experienced in farming, we would court George Hyatt. Well, one day, he had a daughter that lived with them, and she was she wasn't married. Anyway, she came running over one day, and she said, "My father looks very ill. Would you come and look at him?" And I'm not a doctor, so I went and looked, and he was having some kind of a spasm. And in those days, I knew nothing about medicine. So I rushed home, and I called the hospital, Newcomb Hospital, and I said, "A man who looks like he might be dying, and he needs help immediately, please send an ambulance." And they said, "Newfield is out of our territory. We can't do that, and there are no doctors in the area." She said, "Call the fire company." I called the fire company, and they said, "We can't help you. We're not allowed to help. We're not responsible for people. Suppose he dies in one of our units." Well, anyway, make a long story short, he died. And I was so angry because I lost a dear friend. He was black, but he was a dear friend. And when we needed him, he was there. So I wrote an article, which I still have, in the Times Journal. And I wrote this whole story, and based on my story, the whole citizenry of Vineland appointed a doctor to be on call for areas outside of the Vineland area. They were to rotate for emergency calls to help the needy when there's an emergency. And I established that emergency telephone number for that New Jersey Vineland area.
Wonderful.
That was the story, and I still have the article.
Yeah.
That was good.
I was very proud of that,
Oh, I'm sure.
yeah.